The third part of the webinar today gets at the point and the need for a durable coordination or oversight committee that's anticipated to be responsible for the financial aspects of centralized development, providing leadership to determine what the program priorities are, and to develop a portfolio of issue-based prospective funding sources. Now, specific attention is given here to national system priorities and program for resources that do not conflict with the current ongoing state and individual institutional efforts, which clearly begs the question of how should we systematically determine what the ongoing efforts are so that we can both understand, recognize, and then avoid this conflict that would be possible without careful management. The membership of this oversight committee that we are considering at the moment and would value your feedback about includes one, a member of this private resource mobilization task force, and I've reviewed the membership with you earlier in this webinar, an extension administrator from an 1890 institution, extension directors from one, a larger 1862 and a smaller 1862, recognizing that the context of fundraising is likely very different for those two kinds of institutions and therefore have both perspectives represented on the oversight committee, a representative from the institutional home office, quite likely the chief advancement officer, and we are imagining that the chief advancement officer may be the chair or the leader of this oversight committee, plus an additional 8 to 10 members that would consist of perspectives like the National 4-H Council, E-Extension Foundation. We want to be sure that the extension program areas, like youth development, family consumer sciences, community development, ag and natural resources, all have a lens into this committee. Someone from the experiment station section is a likely candidate, Board on Human Sciences out of APLU, and finally, someone who connects to the Foundation for Food and Agriculture, we believe, might be the kind of individuals from these 8 to 10 additional slots. Okay, and once again, we have fairly strong agreement with 90% either agreeing or strongly disagreeing. And like before, we will go to, I think, the next opportunity to just invite your chat suggestions. We have a question for clarification. Who will be paying for this effort? We can't be specific beyond year one at this time. I think I remember to remark that when we were together at the national meeting in September, the endorsement was to use existing funds for year one. And it was at that same location that we were clear that would people support this effort if there were no additional investments or assessments in order to launch year one. However, if year one is successful and has the momentum then that causes us to go forward, there will be a need for resources to hire the chief advancement officer, and that is something that that ECOP and the oversight committee will need to clearly deal with. I would only offer that it would be my hope and expectation that by then we will have an ongoing and successful fundraising program that by itself could and may provide resources to help fuel the efforts itself. Let me see. I think there's another. Jane refines of the Foundation for Food and Ag Research that was authorized in 2014, and that new authorization and funding is required for the next Farm Bill anticipated in 18, or the FFAR must be self-sustaining. Nick Place asks about terms and rotation of members. Great point, Nick. We have not kind of grabbed onto that yet. I suspect between now and when the task force finishes its work, we'll have a much more refined recommendation about when people come to and rotate off the task force. And this is from Laura Johnson, I think. Scott, I think the CAO would be hired by the board and not someone from the hosting institution. Okay. I'm not sure they need to be the chair either. Okay, good consideration. Thank you, Laura. And then a question, should the committee oversight be weighted to those funding the effort? Another very thoughtful observation. Nick says to pay for this, there could be an administrative fee assessed to cover necessary costs. And I assume, Nick, you mean a fee that would be indexed against funds raised, kind of like an indirect cost. Great comments. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I've advanced to the next slide, not seeing more chat information coming in, but you surely can still put information in the chat box. We are heading towards a wrap-up of this webinar, and I'm going to assume no one's heart is broken if we don't take a full hour to do this. But a comment about next steps. You know, I hope it's clear that from the beginning, this task force has engaged and will continue to engage the Cooperative Extension section throughout our work. Following this webinar, the task force will be together sometime in the next 2 weeks, as I recall, to complete a status report that will go to the ECOP Executive Committee at their December 14th meeting. We will then decide what the level of interaction should be or needs to be between that December conversation with ECOP Exec and then the spring ECOP meeting. But it's quite likely that we'll be back out in some way so the system can see what is in a penultimate draft form. And then, as I inferred earlier, we'll have final recommendations to ECOP by spring 2017. It's still your turn, however. I'm a little bit dismayed by the modest participation in this webinar. While I understand people are busy, and I hope and think that this should be an item of really key interest and concern. So we will be sharing the recorded version of this webinar, I believe, at next ECOP, the next ECOP Monday Minute, including another email announcement so that the record can be open to everyone on this webinar and others through email responses and comments. And Jane Schuhart has agreed to accept those. And you can see her email address here if you don't already have it close at hand. And we ask for any additional input by noon Eastern Time, November 21st, so that the task force can fully consider your input. I want to stop because I know Jane can engage in live form if she wants to. Jane, is there anything you'd like to say additionally?
Thanks, Scott. Only to express appreciation to those that have been on the session today, and that I hope you'll encourage the colleagues in your region to view this webinar and to cast it's not a vote. We're not at the point of voting on anything. It's really a polling device in order to get a sense of the nation on what direction this task force might take. So once again, on behalf of Michelle Rogers and ECOP, we really appreciate Scott Reed and his leadership of this group, all the members, and for your full engagement today. Thanks, Scott.
Well, thank you, Jane. It's clearly a team effort. I've been really happy to work with this group, and I think we're making some reasonable progress that's resonating with those that are choosing to engage. Before we sign off, let me just thank Mark again and the E-Extension Foundation for helping to make this possible. Mark, we really appreciate your careful management of our conversation.
Sure thing.
Okay. And with that, I will sign off and look forward to any additional input that you choose to email to Jane. Keep tuned, folks. This is going to be kind of an interesting progression of work between now and spring 2017. Hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Scott and Mark. Bye.